Okay, so today is a big day. What are we doing?
What are we doing? Brand new Old Man Emu 2-inch lift, new Moog suspension parts, new control arms, front and rear.
And it's going on the 06 LJ that kind of looks wimpy on its small little wheels right now and stock suspension. So this will help a lot in the aesthetics department. Right. So tell us everything. Let's point through. Tell us everything we got.
Point through. Well, without opening every box, we actually have a new heavy-duty tie rod modification that we located on the web. It's reinforced heavier tie rod ends, along with the new drag link. The drag link has plate in it, so it definitely needs to be changed. Trying to get rid of some of the shake and wobble in the front end.
Okay, what are all those little boxes over there?
New box. These are all tie rod ends, drag link ends.
Okay, and what about these?
These are new rear sway bar links, getting away from the plastic. We're not heavy duty off-road, but we do have metal sway bar links for the rear end.
Okay, so what about these black stamp pieces?
Alright, those are our new control arms, upper and lower for the front end.
Okay, and then what do we got up here in the middle?
That's part of the Old Man Emu lift, new coil springs front and rear, new nitro shocks, along with this brand new steering stabilizer. Did go ahead and pick up the transfer case drop. They say generally you don't need it, but I went ahead and sprung for it, knowing that in case we have some driveline vibration, that will get us in alignment.
Okay.
Rear track bar bracket to keep that in line.
And steering stabilizer, that yellow thing right there?
Yep, steering stabilizer. Went ahead and went with some coil cup spacers for the front end as well to level the front end. Plan on putting a Smitty built front heavy duty bumper, so that will help level out the ride.
So how much total lift are we getting?
They say 2.5 is what it's logged as, but you can get potentially more. It all depends on the load and weight of the vehicle, so you may see up to 2.5.
So it'll be a good look for this stock LJ. Get it out, make it nice and peppy. So obviously no professional shop experience here, just a couple of weekend warriors. So we'll see how the job goes. And
all right, let's see if we can roll in.
What's that?
Well, while we're here, we're talking about all of this.
Oh yeah, might as well show the wheel and tire combo that's going with it. So
we're not going crazy, but we did go with, you can see that there, some 31-1050 BF Goodrich all-terrains.
So these are stock LJ rims, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so those look nice and clean. So what's the story on those?
Well, we picked those up like a lot of deals out there, $180 for a set of 5 wheels.
Cool, off of Craigslist?
Off of Craigslist.
Good deal. Yeah, those look nice. Tires look good.
Thanksgiving special on the
Why
tires.
don't you put one up in front of the back wheel so we can see what that's going to look like here.
And no, this Jeep's a daily driver, so no, we didn't go crazy with the 35s or anything.
Yeah, that'll look really good.
Wanted to keep the performance with the vehicle as a daily driver. It is the 6-speed LJ version. So
cool. All right, well, let's get started. We're going to go ahead and pull the rear shocks. So let's see if we can get the camera up in here. The upper shock mount is a 13 millimeter, so we're going to go ahead and get that disconnected first. Then we'll remove the lower shock mount. We'll compress the coil spring. We'll get it out of there. We'll go ahead and get that changed out, and then once we've got that done, we'll replace these rear arms. So let's start by getting the shock out. All right, so we're going to try with an impact ratchet. We've got a elbow up on there with a 13 millimeter, and see if we can get this upper shock mount taken off. Thread the needle. What do you have to show for your efforts? Ta-da! All right, let's do 3 more, get the upper shock mounts out. Okay, so lower mount is a 15 on one side and an 18 on the other. So we're going to pull that off now. Okay, there's the lower shock mount bolt out, and shock is free. There's one side, let's go do the other. Man, you ever clean this Jeep? What is all this crap up in here? Alright, we got us a trusty coil spring compressor kit here, rented from Advanced Auto Parts. And so the way that this thing works is you hook these around the coil spring, and then you tighten right here with this at the bottom of the all thread, and that compresses the spring so you can get it up and out of the cups. Here's a trick for using the coil spring compressor. We're going to jack up one side of the axle, which is going to compress the spring for us, so we can go ahead and essentially preload the spring, and watch out because it's going to lift the vehicle, so make sure you're not under it. So we're going to preload the spring and go ahead and get our coil spring compressor on it, and then let the jack down, and it'll take out some of the work for us and speed the process along. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so this is the rubber bump stop that sits up inside of there. So we've got that pulled out, and now we're going to go ahead and loosen, where'd my flashlight go? Go ahead and loosen this socket that holds it up in place. And so hopefully with that out of the way, we'll have enough clearance to go ahead and get this pulled out. We've got it lifted up off the bottom stop, but as you can probably tell, the design of these coil spring compressors aren't going to let us just pull it out. Okay, so coil spring is out. Here's the spring, the bump stop carrier, and the 15mm bolt that holds it, and the top pad for the coil spring. Really just a lot of trying to get it to work its way out, and then once you have enough clearance, it's really pretty easy to pull it out. Okay, so sway bar link is just this one bolt. It's a 19 on the outside, 15mm nut on the inside, and then that disconnects this plastic link that we're going to go ahead and replace with a metal one. So the sway bar is now disconnected on this side. We'll do the same on the other. Okay, so this is the sway bar link from the factory. It's just a piece of plastic, and it comes out from the top. You can't really see up in there. And so there's 19mm on that side, and then there's this factory nut tab that sits in the frame rail. Okay, so there's a brake tab that needs to come off on both sides. You can see it over there where he's getting the impact ratchet set up. It's just a 13mm nut right there on the back side. And if you get that pulled off, you'll be able to get the brake line, emergency brake line out of the way so you can get these control arms off. So the boss has decided that we're going to do this by pulling one control arm at a time. So we'll pull one, replace it, pull one, replace it, and do for all 4. So these have got some pretty big nuts on the back side, but on the other side, the head of the bolt is pretty small. So we'll get an impact on the nut and a wrench to hold it, and we'll get these swapped out. So here's a good comparison of the condition of 12-year-old rubber bushings.
Yeah, that one's got all the cracking.
Versus brand new. So obviously a good thing that we're going to go ahead and get these switched out. So the rear driver outer link arm, control arm, whatever you want to call it, is disconnected. It's held in place with these bolts, 21mm on both sides, and that's what gets it out. So we'll go ahead and get this replaced, and then we'll take the inner off, replace it, and repeat on the other side. We're gonna have to go around to the hardware store. I don't know if we did this taking this out or if it's just been rubbing over time. The rear mounting bolt, the threads are trashed. We tried to run it through a die, and it doesn't even want to work for us. So, and if you look, this rear hole is kind of squared or oblonged off. So I almost wonder if, if this wasn't in here, rubbing or like that, loose and rubbing over time. I mean, it could have been something that we did, who knows. So we're gonna go look and see if we can get some new hardware and then keep moving. with these rear arms in and replaced, and they're not torqued now, they're just on their finger tight. You want to get the weight of the vehicle on the bushings before you torque them so you don't preload the bushing. We're going to work on the extension for the track rod arm up in there. Go ahead and get that done, and then we'll do the new coils, new shocks, and then we'll do the new sway bar links in the rear and get that all buttoned up next. We're going to extend the rear track arm. And we've got this kit from Old Man Emu, so this bracket's going to come up in place and allow us to extend that. But first we've got to pop this plastic cover off. So I'm just using a pry tool here. Here it goes. Alright, so that's the cover that comes off, and then these little carpet clips are what hold it in place. Obviously we'll need to replace those. And so this is what we're going to have to take off, that hex head bolt, and then I'm not 100% sure exactly how this goes on, but it's going to be something like this, I believe. We'll find out here in a second, but I think that's how it's going to go. So we've got this bracket in place now, and we're supposed to drill 2 holes here and here per these Old Man Emu instructions. I've got a couple issues with these instructions. The biggest issue that we've got is the clearance to drill both of these. I can't fit my drill with a bit here. I mean, I'm already touching without a bit, and here I've got my brakes in the way. So I don't know how we're going to figure this one out yet. I don't own a 90-degree drill, so we're just going to have to see if we can get creative and get these holes drilled. So we've got our holes drilled there, and there's the bottom hole, and there's the top. Really don't like the placement of that one. There's practically nothing left on that bracket, but that's where the hole fell. We had to take the caliper out of the way to make it happen, and ended up having to use a step drill, which again, not my favorite way of doing it, but the only thing that would fit in between this space and then up and down vertically. So we're going to get the bracket in place and maybe get the spec together here soon. Alright, the bracket is now in place after fighting with it for way too freaking long. These two were a pain in the ass to get where they needed to go, and anyways, there's like practically no clearance to work down inside here, but it's in place, it's snugged up. Let's get the track rod back in place and we'll go from there. This bracket's in, the track rod arm is in. They wanted us to use the original hardware up here. I really don't think that's right. I think that nut tab should have stayed down inside there, but it's too late now. It's all cinched up in place, and he's working the other side. So next we'll get the new coils and shocks in, and we'll tidy up the rear end and move up forward. We learned that the spring compressor is really not necessary to get these rear coils in. We'll find out with the fronts here in a minute, but there's plenty of room. You can even see with the axle down low like it is right now on the jack, there's inches of clearance, so no issue there. We are going to have to go get more bolts. The spacers that go for the bump stop, they're these little aluminum pieces, and Old Man Emu says you can reuse your original bolts, but as we just found out, the original bolts are just barely long enough, and neither one of us feel good about reusing that. So we're going to go get longer bolts, and we'll get that buttoned up and then get the shocks going. So new shocks are in. So are the coil springs and the spacers up in there for the bump stops. One thing we just realized is we didn't torque this this bolt right here before we got everything else in, which is a problem because there's not enough clearance in here with the Torx head between the fuel tank and this to get it tightened. However, being that shouldn't have been torqued until the vehicle was on its own weight anyways, I don't know how we were supposed to torque it anyways. I think the only thing that would have made sense would be to swap the direction of the head and the nut. But anyways, we'll have to figure that out the hard way. Next thing we'll be getting the sway bar drop links in, and then we'll move up front. Show us the difference.
All right, here's the factory rear sway bar links. We're going to replace these. As you see, they're plastic resin type bushings, and we picked up a set of Moog all metal new bushings. So at least not that there's any real physical evidence here, but it'll be a stronger And while we're replacing all the other parts, why not get new bushings all the way around to tighten up any loose shakes in the suspension? How about that?
Sounds good. The new sway bar mounts, drop links are in. It's the blue. These are the Moog parts. And even though this is rubbing, this is how it was, that emergency brake line rubbing before. So that's how we're going to do it. So that's pretty much done for the rear, other than lowering it down and snugging everything up to torque. We've got a wheel on this side just to see what everything will look like. So we're looking good. We'll go ahead and get the back down, and then we'll move on to the front and finish the rest of this pile of parts. We're gonna take off the sway bar drop links, go ahead and get the shock unmounted and out of here. Then we should be able to compress the coil and get it out. And we've got the load off of it right now. We'll probably do the same thing we did on the rear, replace these arms one at a time, and just go from there. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get these lower control arms replaced, or lower, whatever they are, track arms, and then we'll move up to the uppers. And so we're marking these alignment bolts where they are now, just so we have a reference of roughly where to put them back. Obviously, it's going to change the lift, but it's a good starting point. Okay, so here's why we know we need to replace these. See the wiggle? These bushings are shot.
Can I hear the top one, center?
Okay, there's the top one. So definitely time to replace them. Now's actually a good time with the lower arm out to go ahead and get the coil out while you can really flex the suspension. So it's a little bit of work, but should be able to get it to work its way off.
Best laid plans.
There you go. So that's a little bit easier way than using the spring compressor to go ahead and get that out. We kind of cheated in that we were able to do two things at once. We got the lower arm replaced while it was out. We went ahead and got the new coil spring in here. So we got both of those done. Probably go do the lower on the other side and get it done, and then we'll get the upper arms changed out.
We're working on exhaustion, day 2. It's not very thrilling. Yesterday sucked.
Okay, but what are we working on here? What are these parts?
We are working on, this is the ZJ tie rod modification. Heavy duty. Yes, twice the thickness.
So this isn't the original tie rod that came with the car. This is for ZJ, which is a Cherokee.
Yes, and I don't know if you can see without lighting, but if you wanted to do a comparison, you can compare the bar. And if you come over here and look at the tie rod ends themselves, look at the diameter difference.
Yeah, let me come over there.
So, common modification that everybody says, and this is a solid steel, and this is a hollow tube, and you can see the diameter too as well. So it's a
stronger tie rod.
Stronger tie rod, not that we're bashing it, but it will hold up, and it'll be a great, inexpensive modification. We had to do the drag link anyhow. So you're buying parts and it's not any more expensive, so why not go ahead and upgrade what you're
And so the idea with all of this is that we're going to go ahead and take it out as one unit, the steering rods, and pre-assemble it as one unit so it can go back in together. We're going to try to match it as close to the threads now, and then we've got a new steering stabilizer too to replace the old one right here.
You can see the difference.
Yeah, beefier unit for sure, and that's the.
I mean, it's not terrible, but it's definitely a small, lightweight unit for factory.
Okay, and so update here, since we finished last night, we've gone ahead and we've got the shocks in, the new shocks. We replaced the upper and lower track arms. The only thing that we didn't get done was these bushings that are pressed in up front, and the kit that we got from Advanced Auto Part, we wouldn't have been able to press them out anyway, so we made a decision just to push forward because they didn't look that deteriorated. So we'll see if it becomes an issue or not, and we'll kind of move forward from there. But we're going to go ahead and get the steering knocked out, And at some point in the future, because we don't have the parts, we'll want to also change these sway bar drop links. And when we're doing that, we'll go ahead and update those bushings as well, because we've got those parts. But for now, the goal is to get the front button back up so we can take it for an alignment today and have it drivable for tomorrow. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get this tie rod assembly out. So we've taken off the castellated nut, and now we're gonna beat it with a ball peen hammer to go ahead and release it.
The idea is to shock the metal. They say, there it goes.
It popped right out of there. So
Yep.
now it's released. So now we'll go ahead and hit the other side while it's still held up in place.
All right.
The nut is right here.
Yeah, you see the nut. The nut keeps it from falling out on you, so it doesn't drop down to the ground when you do shock it. So, and I actually make it flush in case you want to do a small tap up top. Yep, some are more stubborn. There it goes. Bam.
So both of those are free. And now what we'll have to do is release the upper mount right up inside of there. So we'll have to get that nut off by hand because we won't be able to get any tools in here. But both of those outside are released. There's our nice little crusty pile of crap that came out when we were hitting on it. So we'll get the upper released, get this old assembly out, and we'll match it up with the new. Okay, for this upper one, we ended up using the pickle fork. Getting that between the ball joint and I guess that's the idler arm coming off of the steering box, and so we got it up in there in that gap and just hit it with a ball peen hammer until it released. So now the steering assembly is completely loose, so we'll go ahead and pull it out and get it matched up with these new pieces. Okay, so we've got the old parts laid out next to the new parts, and we're adjusting the new parts so that they resemble roughly where the old parts are. So we need to come in some more on this so that we can match the number of threads, the spline showing, or the overall length end to end. And so we'll get that matched for both the tie rod and the, what's the other one called?
Drag link?
Yeah, drag link and the tie rod. We'll get both of those matched up, and then we'll get it pre-assembled and we'll put it back up in place under the car. Okay, what are you doing?
Well, it wasn't down all the way. Oh, questioning me. I'm installing a Zerk fitting in the top of the ball joint.
So after we get this up in place, we'll have to grease the ball joints?
Yeah, they have some in it from the factory, but we'll add.
So we're screwing that into the ends of these ball joints.
A drag link,
Tie
rod
are up in place, and so we're getting them torqued down. We'll have to make sure that the hole line's up for the castellated nut so we can get these cotter pins in, and then we'll get our new steering stabilizer going here. We've got some anti-seize on that shaft just so it doesn't ever freeze up, to make it easier to take out in the future. So we're going to get this torqued in, and we'll have all new steering components to replace this nasty, cruddy, original mess. This is all buttoned up. We've got the steering stabilizer in and torqued. We've got the drag link and the tie rod all in, and everything is torqued. Cotter pins are in. So the steering up front is done, just pending an alignment. It's back down on the ground on its new pair of shoes. Looking pretty good. I think the suspension needs to settle some. It's looking a little higher than it actually will be. But overall, looks really good, nice and aggressive with these new BF Goodrich tires, and yeah, everything's looking great. We need to torque in all of our new bushings now that it's under its own weight. So we'll get that good to go, and then we'll take it to the shop and let them align it. And one small issue we're gonna have to figure out is that this spare won't fit on the factory spare carrier correctly. So we're gonna have to figure out how to make that work. But overall, I think everything's looking pretty good. What do you think?
looking great.
Okay, what are you doing?
What?
Talk to the camera.
Sorry. I'm used to being, I'm like the dog that gets spiked with the newspaper. I'm torquing the upper control arm bolts. In tight quarters, this is really fun stuff.
So everything on the front uppers is 55 foot-pounds. So we're doing the uppers, and then we'll do the lowers next. And at the frame, the lower control arms are 130 pounds, and the lower control arms at the axle are 85 foot-pounds, and then the rear uppers are all 55, lowers are all 130. So we're going to go ahead and get these torqued while we're down here, and get everything ready to be able to be driven to get in alignment. So as a bonus round, I think we're going to go ahead and get this Smittybilt front bumper put on here. Okay, last bolts are going in for the Smittybilt bumper.
We forgot to film the minor modifications to the hole slots.
Yeah, the holes on this bumper were a little too tight for the frame rails, and as far as we know, this Jeep's never had any sort of damage or off-roading. So it looks like Smittybilt was slightly off on these holes, maybe something warped in welding, who knows, but we had to get out the belt sander, the air belt sander, and get in there and widen the holes a little bit. Otherwise, there's no way that the top mounts were going to work. But it's in place now. Looks pretty good. I think it's a good addition.